This is my Commonplace book, and put very simply, it is a book where you collect ideas, thoughts, anecdotes, information from things you have consumed. I like to think of it as a personal treasury of borrowed thoughts. As a scholar, I really like using Commonplace books because they help me keep track of the ideas and thoughts that are influencing the development of my intellectual journey. So I started this book in late August of this year. In this first page, I've got 3 different quotes and passages. They're broadly about the same concept, which is time, but from different perspectives. So this first one over here is a passage by someone called Karen Barad. She's a theoretical physicist and a philosopher whose work I really like. The next passage is also from the same place. And the last one here talks about time, but from a more sociological perspective, unlike Barad's more philosophical exploration. So while these ideas belong to 2 pretty different fields, they seem to intermingle with each other during my consumption. And this book provided the space for me to explore them together. And you can see over here, I've written a little note summarizing what I saw as the intersection between their ideas. But generally, there isn't very much standardization in the way I commonplace. It changes from page to page. Sometimes I've taken note of page numbers, like over here, and sometimes I take note of years. But most of the time, though, even if I don't record the metadata of these ideas, I do keep note of the names of people who've authored these ideas and quotes, because I like to see the kind of people who have become a part of me and the way I think. And this links to one of the things that I really like about commonplacing. It's that even though these ideas and thoughts that you collect aren't your own, they are things that have touched you in some way. Because what spoke to you is a reflection of what you resonated with at that moment of your life. So it doesn't really matter if these words aren't your own. I think especially when you're developing yourself as a scholar or a thinker, you want to keep track of the kind of ideas that are shaping your intellectual autobiography. For starting the practice of commonplacing, you only really need a notebook and a pen. And there's just 3 simple steps to get started with a commonplace book. The first thing you do to begin is consume. But remember that the consumption for commonplace books doesn't have to be just papers and books that are directly related to your research or studies. It can be podcasts, seminars, and lectures that you've attended, documentaries that you watch, even Twitter threads of interests. Literally anything, any media that forms part of your daily broader consumption can be commonplace. For example, I have this quote from a podcast that I listened to that I really like called Philosophize This, and I really resonated with it, so I put it down over here. So I like to keep the consumption that makes it into my commonplace books really broad, because it doesn't just serve the purpose of informing my research, but also my identity as the kind of thinker and scholar that I am and I'm becoming. As you consume, you record the things that really make you dwell on them, things that arrest your attention and call on you. And these things that you choose, or perhaps they choose you, should mean something to you. And that because if it moved you in a particular way, it is personal to you and your experiences of unfolding through life. So I recommend being selective about what you choose to record. One thing that I sometimes do when recording is that I sometimes use different fonts. So things that like really stand out to me or have significantly moved the way I think, like you see over here, I tend to capitalize them because when I look back at them, it stands out to me even when I'm reviewing these pages. I also think that recording things as you consume is great for developing practices of active engagement. In the current information age that we live in, it's so easy to just passively consume a lot of content. I think it's important to be mindful about the things you consume and also how you consume them. Commonplacing can help you enact a shift in your relationship with consumption. So you don't just consume something and then immediately discard it. You make an active effort to take it forward with you. So you need to then digest what you're recording for it to really become part of you. And the way you do that is by reflecting, which is also the last step to commonplacing. As you can see here, I've got these little diagrams, notes. They're just my thoughts about what I've been recording. I also tend to put them in like these little black pen boxes, just again so that they stand out to me later on and I can know that this is different from other people's thoughts. And it's the way that I make sense of other people's ideas which have been already collated here. The important thing here is that this process of reflecting turns the things you consume and record into activities of the mind. Marcus Aurelius, who by the way also kept a Commonplace book and which more or less became the book Meditations, would call this process dying the mind. By writing them down and mulling over them, these ideas become etched onto you. But as you see across these pages, I don't have a method of organizing my Commonplace book. It's not pretty or aesthetic. I don't have very good handwriting, and it's pretty messy most of the time. But having reflected on my own book the past few weeks while making this video, I've realized that I don't mind this messiness because I think that order comes from chaos. I also find that organizing and structuring things too much inhibits creativity and our abilities to produce new modes of thought, especially for a Commonplace book, which is a space precisely for different things to intermingle and intersect. I think that too many boundaries and too much structure restricts the free movement necessary for creative production. To a certain extent, the organization of your book should emerge from your own practice of commonplacing. I think that analog books and so writing with hand also makes your Commonplace book far more intentional in terms of collecting words and ideas. It takes more effort and it's far more deliberate. So it's like you choose to take the time to make certain thoughts a part of you through physically writing them out. Well, you can also have a digital Commonplace book using something like Notion, Obsidian, or even just a Word document. But with digital commonplacing, because it is so much easier to just copy and paste and type really fast, you start collecting, or maybe even dumping a lot more stuff that does not have very much value. But this doesn't mean that you can't use digital Commonplace books. You just need to be more intentional in your practice. I think the one other thing that is really worth mentioning here is that while you do need to be intentional about what you put into your Commonplace book, this does not mean that you need to be hypercritical of what you're capturing. So don't think that you have to answer immediately why you're choosing to put down a quote or a passage and how it's going to inform your thinking. That you were touched in some unspeakable, unthinkable manner, touched enough for you to spend a few extra minutes with this idea to note it down, is enough justification for you to put an idea down into your Commonplace book.